Welcome back. Let's continue our discussion on population dynamics. We already touched on the sources of genetic variation as well as conditions for natural selection. So moving on to part 3, types of selection. Let's now differentiate between the 3 types of selection. We have stabilizing, disruptive, and directional selection. Each type has distinct effects on allele frequencies within a population. So let's break it down, starting with stabilizing selection. Stabilizing selection favors intermediate traits and generally reduces genetic variation as extremes of the trait are selected against. Disruptive variation favors individual with extreme traits and can lead to increased genetic variation as intermediate traits are selected against. And finally, directional selection occurs when individuals with one of the extreme traits have a higher fitness, leading to a shift in allele frequencies over time. Let's work through a few real-life scenarios together, and while I read through each scenario, I want you to try to identify the type of selection at play. Sound good? So let's start with scenario number 1, human birth weight. In a population of human babies, extremely low birth weight and extremely high birth weight are associated with increased health risks. As a result, babies born with average birth weights have higher survival rates and better overall health. What type of selection is this a prime example of? Right, this is stabilizing selection. Stabilizing selection occurs as the selective pressure favors individuals with intermediate birth weights, reducing the frequency of both extremely low and extremely high birth weights. Next, let's look at finches. In a population of finches with varying beak sizes, there are 2 distinct food sources available. We have small, soft fruits and large, tough seeds. Finches with small beaks are more efficient for feeding on small fruits, while finches with large beaks are better at cracking open those tough seeds. What type of selection is this a prime example of? Right, this is disruptive selection. Disruptive selection occurs as both extremes of beak size are advantageous for accessing different food resources, leading to increased fitness for individuals with either very small or very large beaks, and a decrease in individuals with those intermediate beak sizes. Lastly, let's look at the classic example of the peppered moths. In a population of peppered moths, you find both dark-colored peppered moths and light-colored peppered moths. Originally, light-colored moths were more prevalent because their habitat had light-colored trees. But as the Industrial Revolution took place, industrial pollution led to the darkening of tree trunks due to soot deposits. Light-colored moths, which were previously well camouflaged against the lighter tree trunks, became more conspicuous and easier to find to predators, resulting in higher predation rates of those light-colored moths. However, a small number of dark-colored moths were able to then better blend in and camouflage against those darker tree trunk colors that are now covered in soot. So the dark moths now have a survival advantage, and their frequency increases in the population over time as they're able to successfully survive and reproduce, while the light-colored moths decline over time as they aren't able to survive as well because they're being preyed upon. What type of selection pressure is this a prime example of? Right, this is an example that demonstrates directional selection and how environmental changes can drive directional selection and favor individuals with traits that enhance their survival and reproductive success. Hopefully this exercise helped you better differentiate between stabilizing, disruptive, and directional selection based on their impact on allele frequencies. Now, tying this all together, Inheritance, competition, and variation are the cornerstones of evolution by natural selection. Individuals with advantageous traits are more likely to survive, reproduce, and pass on their genes, resulting in adaptations, traits that enhance an organism's fitness within its environment. But natural selection is not the only source of genetic variation in populations. We also have all of these sources of genetic variation within populations as well. Natural selection is just one of the methods in which we see changes in allele frequencies in a population over time. It can lead to further genetic variation or alterations of genetic variation in that population. And within natural selection can act in different ways on populations, which is how we got to our topic of discussing the different types of selection. But looking at evolution as a whole, by accumulating adaptations over time, populations evolve, leading to the diversity of life we see today. Well, congratulations! You've delved into the sources of genetic variation and evolution, as well as the fascinating dynamics of populations. You explored the impact of various processes on genetic variation and evolutionary change, identified the conditions necessary for natural selection, differentiated between different types of selection, and understood how inheritance, competition, and variation shape evolution. Keep exploring these concepts, and let's continue unraveling the mystery of biology and the incredible story of life on Earth.